We're always on the move. How we live and work have blended together, and our mobile devices are empowering us to stay on top of it all with the click of a button. But this convenience of working in so many environments can come at a price. Our security. With Smart Eye technology, you can easily protect your documents and files from unauthorized access. Based on the most powerful forms of biometric security, including facial, fingerprint, and voice recognition, Smart Eye ensures your confidential information can only be viewed by the users you've assigned, giving you 100% control of your files with no chance of unintended views. Files can then be sent, retrieved, and tracked securely in the Smart Eye app. With Smart Eye technology, your confidential information is safe and your peace of mind restored. Learn more at GetSmartEye.com.
When the founders of the United Arab Emirates marked the start of the future, the next generation turned it into reality. Through time, through the desert, through the distance. Now, the UAE's journey to the future begins. Welcome to the Future Innovation Summit.
Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it's the CEO series, where we interview global leaders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders from across the globe. Today, our guest is Dexter Caffey, who is the founder and chief disruptor of Smart Eye technology. He's a dual entrepreneur. He founded Smart Eye technology in January 2018. And he also is the founder of Caffey Investment Group. He has spent 20 years plus working with major publicly traded U.S. companies. And during this time, he helped institutional clients across financial platforms to hedge their portfolio risk and to reduce costs. And he's also a good friend of mine. Dexter, my man, how are you?
Good, Ron. How are you? Thank you so much for having me today.
I'm glad to have you. You know, we met at the Future Innovation Summit, which was the previous lead-in video. And I was so impressed with the thought process of starting this and what you were doing, presenting to that global audience, at Future Innovation Summit. And you will be at Future Innovation Summit Part 2. I think that's in May 11th and 12th. So we'll see each other again, in Dubai during that time. And you're in Dubai.
Absolutely. Looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah. So cool. Let's talk through Smart Eye. We saw the video. Where did that idea come from? I mean, you're in investment banking kind of structure, and then you go to technology. How did that happen?
That's a great question, Ron. About 3 years ago, I was actually on a trip to Israel. And again, like you said, my background was financial strategies, where I actually did hedging for major companies where I own my own business. And so what happened about 3 years ago, I was on a trip to Israel. And I went on that trip really to kind of network with other executives that were on that trip. We had executives from major publicly traded companies that was on that trip. And so I had nothing in mind but just a network at the end of the day. And what happened was we were at a cybersecurity event in Israel, and I sit next to this guy and talking to this cybersecurity expert. And I noticed when I was talking to him, I happened to look over his shoulder, and I saw his laptop screen. I saw Word documents on his laptop screen. I saw PDF documents on this laptop screen, and a thought hit my mind, and it said, why should I be able to see any document that's on this guy's laptop screen? It's none of my business. I said, what if we could create software that would actually block your entire screen if someone physically looked at your screen that didn't have your face? And so we use facial recognition in order to accomplish that.
Wow. So it's kind of like everyone has an idea that they're gonna take it to become an entrepreneur. So you went from idea to execution. You didn't just leave that as a thought. What was the next step? Walk us through the next step from that original idea.
That's a great question. It was. I remember when I first had the idea. I remember coming back from Israel, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia, in the States, and I was the thought of how could we create software that'll shut off and block the screen when somebody else physically looks at my document while my inside the Smart Eye technology platform. And the thought stayed with me night and day. I remember going to my aunt's funeral back in Ohio, and I remember driving back from Atlanta to Ohio with my cousin, and all I talked about was this technology. Could we stop people from looking at documents on your screen? Because it's none of their business. So I went from that thought to realizing that let's go ahead and start to execute. And this was in late 2017. So in 2018, I remember reaching out to an investor because what happened, it was a company that I was dealing with. They needed to, I had to pay them $50,000 to do the research on the project first, just to see if they could even do it.
Yeah.
There was no guarantees they could even do it. But the research would cost $50,000. And as you know, Ron, being a small business person, sometimes you're not always liquid. So you have to figure out what you need to tap into to do this, to do that. It's just common. It's just the way small businesses operate. And so I didn't have the actual capital on me, and I didn't have the money. And so I said, listen, I went to an investor of mine, and his name is Peter. And I said, Peter, can we have lunch? He said, sure. What do you want to talk about? I said, well, I'll tell you when we get there. And so I sat down with Peter, and he's a little over 80 years old now. And I said, Peter, I'd love for to start a business to where if you looked at a document on my screen, it would recognize my face through facial recognition. But when it sees your face, it'll recognize it's a stranger that's in the screen. It'll block my entire screen. This is a warning away from, warning multiple viewers looking at this screen. So Peter said, okay, Dexter, that's nice, but I'm an 80-year-old man. What do I know about technology? He said, what the heck do you want from me? I said, Peter, I need $50,000 from you just to start the research. So he looked at me and said, he leaned in and said, so you want me to be the first sucker? And I said, no, I said investor. So that day he actually fronted me the $50,000, and I did not tell my wife because I actually had to put up shares of my business in order to do that. So I meant that if I didn't pay Peter his money back, then all the revenue from that business would actually go back to Peter first.
Yeah.
And so 90 days went by, not a lot of word. Didn't know if this would happen. No research in hand, zero. And just about maybe a little over 90 days, I got a research report showing exactly how they can create Smart Eye technology. It was a 60-page document showing step by step. I was floored, completely blown.
Wow.
And so from that point, Ron, I just talked to other investors, and they helped me fund Smart Eye, and we raised close to almost $7 million as far as funding is concerned. And so it's just one of those things. And currently, right now, we have over 27,000 downloads of our mobile app. That's on the App Store, and anybody can go and on the App Store, Google Play Store, and download Smart Eye. The download is free, so you can go ahead and test it out for yourself and things like that as well. There's a cost, of course, when you want to upload so much data, but as far as the actual download is free. Anybody can go ahead and test it out for free.
Wow, that's amazing. So when we talk about idea to execution, as I said, everybody and their mother has an idea for something. So the quote I always like to use is Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face. Exactly. And you got hit in the face numerous times, but you still kept coming back.
Absolutely, and that's the thing, and that's the important thing that you said, Ron, because it's not about, you have an idea. Everybody has ideas, but it's about seeing that idea through fruition, and you do whatever you need to do in order to get the job done. So that means you sacrifice, you take risk, and this is what scares most people about, is taking risk. But as an entrepreneur, that's your job, is to take a risk. That's what you get paid for. You don't get paid to be conservative. You get paid to take risk. Smart risk is what I'm saying. Very smart risk, not dumb risk, but very smart risk.
Okay. So finance. Your degree is in finance, and you're in finance, and all of a sudden technology. That's a different skill set. How did you? Because I'm thinking through that as I read through it, and I'm thinking, how do you go from finance and understanding all the technological aspects of this venture?
I had to actually, again, I hired developers to actually build our software platform. So they were the smart people who actually built it. I gave them the direction as far as what I wanted as a product. And so going from finance to technology was a little tough, because all I knew was about, stocks, futures, that world.
Yeah.
And now I had to actually learn a lot. So I actually read as much. I actually leaned on a guy and told me, what do I need to read in order to understand this stuff? And so I read tons of literature, talked to tons of people, learned from companies that I talked to, and it was a learning experience, and it was something that I just began to understand and to learn, and it became a natural, normal thing to me. It's not even a big deal now. Initially, it was the first year or so it was,
Yeah.
but after that, I knew the lingo just like anybody else does, as far as the area that we're specialized in.
Okay, so having that conversation with a technology person, you feel comfortable in that space now. That transition was
extremely, exactly. I mean, I have no problem with that.
Yeah. So you talked about downloading the app. So is that is it from a corporate sector, or is it private? What is the customer base that you have now?
Actually, right now we have anybody can go download the app as an individual private user. You can download the app. If you wanted to actually buy our entire platform, and you can have the desktop version and the control panel or dashboard for the system administrators. That's a cost that you have to pay for that. But the mobile app goes along with that for the entire platform. So really, we're more of a B2B play than a C2C play. But we have, again, over 27,000 C2C individuals who've downloaded SmartEye, which to me is amazing. Going from an idea to having people download your software, it's just amazing, because it was a crazy idea that has gotten the attention of multi-billion-dollar organizations around the world, and also some of the wealthiest people around the world. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, wealthiest people. Yeah, the funding aspect, right? So
absolutely.
Can you tell us that some of your clients, major clients, or you talked about major corporations? Can you share some of that?
Yeah, well, right now I'm on NDAs with several of them, so I can't give specific names.
Okay.
But and some of we're actually working. We have a lot of several small businesses now that are using SmartEye technology, and so we haven't landed that major enterprise yet, but we've got several. We've got 4 or 5 of them who, as you know, with enterprise, it takes time. You don't do that in 3 months. This doesn't happen that way. But the reality is, we've got some of the largest corporations globally with some that we're talking to and have tested out SmartEye themselves, that have revenue over $200 billion a year in revenue. So that's the league that we're playing in when it comes to people having a serious interest in SmartEye technology.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's a long process. Because I was dealing with a client out of Switzerland, and they sent me it was 60 pages that we had to go through to make sure everything was dotted the I's and all this kind of thing. And I think from an entrepreneurial side, so you say B2B, it's a different ball game.
It is a different ball game.
Different ball game versus B2C. Can you kind of give us some insight on that, the struggles you may have in calling on a large corporation, and how do you even get into that boardroom or conference room?
Well, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of major relationships from the largest corporations in the world, just because I've dealt with those companies on my previous life in owning my own business in the financial services. So I've had some of the largest companies become client of ours on a commodity side, what I dealt before, and so I've already had those relationships that were already built over 20 years. So it wasn't like something new, and plus the people I have as far as friends and mentors, they have relationships at those enterprises. So you just don't pick up the phone and call enterprise and say, hey, I want to talk to you. You've got to have relationships. If there's no relationships, then nothing's going to happen. Even when you do have relationships, it still is going to take a while because they have to go through all the red tape and all the bureaucracy and everything else as from a big corporation. Exactly.
Yeah, the document's this thing, and they sent me the document, and I said, 60 pages. I said, well, we
Exactly.
have compliance issues and all these kinds of things, and it was a learning curve for me, to try and infiltrate. I don't want to say infiltrate, but to try to get that business, and I had to go through that in order to do that, and then that came down to finding legal help. So how do you build your team? How do you build a team to take this forward? What do you look for when you're looking to hire people, and how do you identify the gaps of skills that you would need?
Well, I'm fortunate. I work with a developer who understands exactly who's the right people to put in place. So the developer that I use has helped and has built the team for me to create the software that we actually have. Still, there's always a challenge in finding people, the right people, because this is a very expensive environment that we're in right now, especially in development, because everybody currently right now are getting a high price. That may change a year or two from now if the economy slows, but for right now, that's not the case. So it's still always a challenge to find the right people and for them to stay as well. So that's a never-ending battle.
Yeah, I thought of you last night because I knew we were having the talk today, and my daughter was visiting here for the weekend, and I looked and as I was in the kitchen, I looked over at her and she was going through, the normal thing. I say 2 fingers. They can do 2 fingers. I do 1. And I'm thinking, wow. And I stood there and I could basically look over her shoulder and see everything that she was typing.
Exactly. And this is what Smart Eye does. Smart Eye actually stops people. It would have given you a warning sign if you actually saw that actually occur. So if your daughter, she didn't have to look at you, Smart Eye would have picked up your face in the background and blocked the entire screen. It's warning, multiple, especially if she had a document that she was actually looking up, because that's what we're really for. It's for documents that are already prepared and that you're sending to somebody else. It's not necessarily for editing and things like that, but it's really for documents that are already prepared that you're sending to somebody as a kind of a final document.
Okay. So COVID comes around and disrupts everything. Mm-hmm. And I love the term chief disruptor. And now we have to put on a mask. So how does the technology work with the mask environment?
Well, we have inside of our facial recognition, we do have an engine that's not 100% complete, but it does, you can still be recognized with your mask. I was recognized maybe 10 to 20% of the time, so it's not, there yet. But for the most part, you really have to still take off that mask in order to identify your face. We do have something outside of that to where you don't have to necessarily even use the facial recognition. We have other things that we have in place that we'll talk about another time, but that can still identify you even outside of the traditional facial recognition and things like that as well. So.
Okay, cool. So you were already an established entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. You have this idea and you started down another lane. How did you manage that? Because when I read through it, I said, okay, I'm doing one thing now. How can I work with a lot of startups, so I'm thinking, okay, I can allot X amount of time this week for this, and it's trying to manage that overflow.
Yeah, that was tough. It was tough initially because I still had my other business that I was pretty much, and a good thing about the other business that I did have, it was a low maintenance business. So, I had one Dow Jones component company who was my client, and so that was pretty easy to maintain because we had pretty much the same consistent things that we did every quarter, every 2 months, so it was very consistent. I didn't have it wasn't a lot of things that it was kind of on autopilot basically, but it was still, from a regulatory standpoint, it still was getting too much to manage, and that's why, like I said, over a little over a year and a half ago or so, I literally just had to move on from that just because it was time at that point, because we were pretty much getting the full platform built up for Smart Eye, so it was time to definitely move on from there.
Okay. Is there governance issues for data that you maybe we're faced with and trying to figure out how we were going to move this product from point A to point B? Because there's a lot of today with data compliance and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. The data that we have, and basically we're focused mainly here in the States initially right now, but the data that we actually, when you upload a document into Smart Technology platform, that's actually encrypted on our cloud environment.
Okay.
So even we couldn't see it because the data is encrypted, just like all the other things such as your biometrics are also encrypted data as well. So everything when it comes to the key things like documents, when it comes to the key things like biometrics, those things are encrypted inside of the Smart Technology inside of our cloud environment.
Okay. Was that a learning curve that maybe you didn't think of when you were putting this together? That there was another
Absolutely,
component?
all that was. I mean, I knew of encryption previously, but it was definitely a learning curve because it was a lot of things involved in it. You know, the documents are encrypted when they sit in our cloud. They're
Okay.
encrypted when they move from you to me. Even if you're in our cloud, there's some movement so in the middle, they're actually encrypted in the middle the whole way. So they're encrypted as in rest, and they're encrypted in transit when they're moving in transit. So they're encrypted the entire time. So sometimes people encrypt documents just in rest as they're sitting there, but when they move, they may not be encrypted. So ours is encrypted as you move, and it's encrypted in rest at all times.
You talk like a true technology person, you know. Yeah, so when you're going through using these kind of terms, which is probably the normal terms you use in the technology space, but you picked it up pretty well.
Thanks, appreciate it. Appreciate it. A lot of things I had to learn everything, even that I had to learn.
Yeah, yeah. So in looking at the two businesses, where does the energy come from? The energy is in the Smart Eye. This is low maintenance. I could do this, but I'm focused here to build this up to a huge brand, the Smart Eye brand.
Absolutely. I would say the energy comes from the passion of trying to help people to protect their documents.
Okay.
I'm passionate about helping people, period, regardless of whether it's business or not business, personal. That's my passion. So if we could stop people from, because one of the biggest things, as you know right now, is business email compromise. In other words, if I sent you an email and said, Ron, here's our wiring instructions for you to wire that $100,000 over to me because we did this deal for you. So now you need to go ahead and pay us the $100,000. And here's my wiring instructions. If I sent that to you through email, what happens is that hackers get in between that sometimes, and they'll say, hey, Ron, this is Dexter. You know what? Do you know those wiring instructions I sent you 15 minutes ago?
Yeah.
I tell you what, disregard that. We had a problem with our old bank. Why don't you wire it to our new bank here? And you thought it was me because they put my last name Caffey with 2 Y's instead of 1 Y, and it came to you, and now all of a sudden you wired that $100,000, and I call you and say, hey Ron, where's that $100,000? I sent it to you like 2 days ago. I said I never received it. So this is happening every day at major companies. This is happening at small companies. This is happening. This is happening in every organization. There was even a doctor's office, a little small doctor's office, a 5-person doctor's office. The guy had just got his new facility put up, and he bought some chairs. So they spent $60,000 on some office furniture, and he wired the money, and it went right to the pocket of a hacker.
Oh,
a small doctor's office.
Yeah. So it's not.
So if you'd have sent that through Smart Eye, if you'd have sent that through Smart Eye, you would have gone from Smart Eye app to Smart Eye app. You know, from Ron to Dexter. That's simple.
Okay.
So you would have avoided letting your emails be compromised by hanging out there. And so Smart Eye Technology stops that. So at the end of the day, we've created a private pond. So in other words, if your company, Ron, wants to send me something, and let's call my company Dexter's Lawn Shop. If you wanted to send me something, I would have to approve your company first in our control panel before you're allowed to send me anything. So therefore, I would never receive a document from an unknown person. It's not going to happen because I have to approve your company in the first place to even talk to me through Smart Technology platform.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of scams going on. I read the things online, and I often wonder sometimes, how could you be so stupid to even respond to that? But you know what? It comes through, looks official, and you just kind of go along with it.
Ron, I've sat in a lot of major publicly traded companies' back rooms, and this is common. They write it off as a business write-off, but I've sat and talked with a lot of security people, and this is not unusual. This happens every day, and you would think, because you remember people are busy, Ron, and they just say, "Let me get this out here real quick because I got something else to do." Yeah. Hackers know that. They know you're busy.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's.
And they always put urgency on it.
Yeah.
Could you get it out this morning by 9:30?
So let me ask you this: as you build a team, What do you look for in bringing someone on inside of your organization? Is it the technical skills, people skills, or how do you kind of decide if I'm in three people and how am I going to make that decision?
That's a great question. I would say, depending on the position, regardless of the position, actually, the number one thing I care about, do I like you? Are you
Okay.
down to earth?
Yeah.
Because I don't care how smart you are.
Yeah.
If you can't get along with the team, you're going to destroy us.
Yeah.
So I don't care how smart you are. It means nothing to me. Personality is everything. So if a person is humble, and you can tell that a lot of times, you can't tell it every single time, but and sometimes it doesn't show itself for quite some time as well. But I think I'm upfront, and I let people know upfront. If you decide to change, as people do,
Yeah.
if you decide to change and your personality becomes that which I didn't know of,
Yeah.
I have to let you go. It's
Yeah.
that simple. You understand? It's pretty simple, pretty cut and dry.
Mm.
Because people change. They come at you one way, Ron, in an interview.
Yeah.
And then 6 months down the road,
Yeah.
you got a different person.
They say
Can't
all
have
the right
that.
things to get in the door. And then when they get in the door, they pull the mask off and say, here we go.
And this is who I really am.
And you're sitting there like, oh my God, did I make a huge mistake in doing that?
Exactly. So I let people know up front, if you do change, as people do, I will also make a change.
So you talked about the person that you were able to go through for the initial funding of that. So let's talk through startup costs, because the course I did that I told you about earlier was talking about being an entrepreneur, because everybody thinks it's easy. They have no idea. They don't even have this much of an idea as to what that is. It's kind of like the iceberg. You see success, or what you see is success, and all the stuff that goes under that.
I would tell you, as far as startup costs, that's just the very beginning. I mean,
Yeah.
you pay a few $1,000s. I mean, it probably costs like less than $2,000 to get everything set up, the basics to get everything set up. That's just a basic initial setup for things. But then the real costs come involved when you have to hire people, when you have to have technology people. So it's beyond just, you get to a point where it's beyond you, and it's something that you can't do by yourself. That's
Okay.
when you have to bring on investors, as investors, not partners, but just investors. That's all they are to you. They're not partners who are operators in your business. They're investors. And so I think a lot of people think that things are easy because they've never done it before. But it's just kind of like, I remember when, my father taught me how to drive a stick shift. I think I was maybe 13 years old. And so he would teach me for like probably 6 months or a year how to shift. I knew how to shift left and right. I could do it. When I hear the gears shifting, I knew exactly when to change that thing.
Yeah.
Now he said, it's time for you to get behind the wheel. That was a whole different animal, a complete different animal.
Yeah,
And you have to know how much pressure.
My first car was the shift.
Right. So you have to understand that learning how to shift gears is one thing. That's great.
Yeah.
Now you have to understand how to use that clutch and that
Yeah.
gas and that brake together, especially
Yeah,
on a
that
hill.
balance.
Especially on a hill. I didn't know about that until I got in and said, wow, this is completely a different animal than what I thought.
Yeah. You took me back with that. Because I'm like, whoa, a stick shift. And you look at car. And the stick shift. I saw an article on the Ferrari. So the Ferrari stick shift is on the wheel.
Steering wheel? Wow.
It's not the thing this down here the way that it used to be.
Right. And see, that's the challenge. So things have changed, and so it still does the same thing. It still shifts, but it's just it's a different way in how it shifts now versus 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, that was it. But so let's take that through. So that's the financial side. Let's take that to the talent side. You said, when I realized that maybe I'm not as good as, I think that I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, but I'm not as good to do the social side. So I need a social person to do that. What is the threshold for that when you come to the conclusion that maybe I need expertise here?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, you can't be perfect in everything. You can't be the financial person. You can't be the initially as a startup. You have to be all these things. You know, the financial person, the marketing person, the everything
Yeah.
to the organization.
Yeah.
That's standard and that's normal for all of us. And but you do get to a point where you do need certain specialties, where people have certain specialties that'll make your life so much easier, and you have to bring them in for that. I've done that, several times, bringing in people for like marketing. Sometimes one of the things you can do too, Ron, instead of actually finding a person, you can actually find a company to outsource things to instead of actually hiring a person. A lot of people always think about hiring a person, but a lot of times you can outsource a lot of things such as marketing. You'll get to a point where you may need to bring somebody in house to manage it, but you can still outsource marketing to a company. You can outsource PR to a company. You can outsource a lot of things to a company.
Yeah.
So it's not just always hiring somebody just to hire somebody. Only hire somebody really if you need them. And sometimes you do need people in order to kind of guide the marketing people, and you need people to kind of guide the PR people. You need people to kind of guide the financial services people. So that's a situation where you will need people for that. But as far as them doing the big overall job of marketing and things like that, you can use an outside company and actually use them as an outsourced company to actually help so you have a whole team instead of just one person.
Yeah.
And you're paying a lot less.
Yeah, you're paying a lot less because you don't have that cost, that payroll cost, which is
exactly
tough when you're in business.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
I always go back to the Tyson quote, because I think that quote to me sums up what it's like to be an entrepreneur, of what it's like to start a business, the old school kind of thing, before the word entrepreneur even came about. Because we have these idealized visions of, oh, I own my own business. And I hear people say that, and I said, have you really given thought to that? Because I understand, I call it the itch. You have the itch, say, you know what, I really want to do this thing. But you know what? Getting from that itch to wherever you need to be, that's an MBA process that you're going to go through.
Yes.
For that execution piece and doing that, because there's a lot of parts to that.
Yes. And that's one of the things too, people, when they talk about owning their own business, I mean, you don't start a business because you want to own a business. You start a business because you see a need. When you see a need in the marketplace that's not being fulfilled, that's when you start a business. Not because you think something is cool and you want to do this and do that. It's about a need. What is the need out there? And that's our job. We get paid to solve a problem. That's entrepreneurs. We get paid to solve. If you're not solving a problem, then why should somebody pay you?
So in your research, when you came up with this idea, you're looking across and you see a person's phone and you see everything on their laptop or whatever it is. In your research, there was no one else out there that had that kind of technology. So you looked at it from that vantage point, competitive analysis or whatever it would be. Walk us through that.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I did look around, and of course, it's billions of people on Earth, so it's hard for you to find exactly who's doing what out there. But no, when I looked around and I talked to my development team and things like that, this was something that I thought of. Of course, you're always going to have people who come down the road and do something similar, but at the same time, you can do something. But if you don't have relationships at major companies and businesses, it's all wasted time. I mean, anybody can start something, but I always like to say, a startup is not we like to use the word startup, which is cool, but it's a business at the end of the day. And whether it's a barbershop, whether it's a coffee stand, you have expenses and you have to make revenue. It's still a business, no matter what type of business. It's still a business.
The barbershop piece caught me too. That was my first job, working in a barbershop, and I became a licensed barber. And that was the first business I actually ran. And that was and
that's a very good business too.
Yeah, that was my freshman year I went to college with that certification. And I was able to open up a business inside of my dorm as a barber.
Exactly. And I did the same. I cut hair when I was in high school to try to pay my high school tuition that I had when I went to a private school.
Okay.
So,
yeah, so we got the barber connection too. So that's cool.
Absolutely, definitely. And we go to the same barber right now. Actually, we go to the same barber right now.
Yeah. So that journey takes a while. So if you look back from coming out of college, walk us through that. So you started the financial firm right out of college, or how did you start the first one?
Okay, great. Actually, I had a professor in college who took us to New York to see the New York Stock Exchange, and at the time, the commodity exchanges were physically, in the World Trade Center then
Yeah.
in the late '90s, and so I really loved what I saw with the commodity exchanges. So I said, hey, listen, what if I went to this business? Because I'd love to do that. So I went and worked. I moved from Ohio, where I was from, and then I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and I just went to go find a firm, a commodities firm to work for. And went there for about 6 months. Went to another place after that for about 6 months. Then, it was just like, you know what? I want to start my own business because I used to work for my father anyway in the insurance business. And the bug of owning your own business was always there because it was his business. And I loved the freedom of it. And I said, wow, I'd love to, start my own commodities business. It was just in my blood. And did that. And so when I did that, actually before I started it, Ron, again, I didn't have the money to start that either. And so I literally worked two jobs to save up money in order to start the business. And I remember, laughing, this girl laughing at me saying, why are you working so hard? You're trying to start something that you don't even know will even work. And I said, and I said, so what you're saying is that, I'm the business. So what you're saying, I would fail because that's all a business is, the person that's running it. So, and I know I'm not a failure. So what you're saying is dead wrong. And so, years later, I'm sure she was still working at, mediocre type of jobs. And I was, dealing with major publicly traded companies. Yeah. So that's the reality of it.
Yeah. So let's talk through that for a second, because you have people around you and you're focused and you have the chatter that says, oh, you need to go ahead and get a job. You need to go ahead and do this. How do you filter that out? Because my way of I just turned it off. Well, years ago, I just turned it off and I'm going to do what I'm going to do and not even listen to anybody.
The worst thing you can do as an entrepreneur or wannabe entrepreneur is to tell everybody about what you want to do. Yeah. You keep quiet and you just start to move ahead. It's hard not to tell people because you're excited about it, but the best thing to do is you put your head down and you start executing. And because there's so many, the majority of people aren't going to, believe in it anyway. So it's really, you're wasting your time by talking. I tell you, when I first started Smart Eye, I was so excited about it. I remember walking around the park with this medical doctor. We walked around the park just about every day together. And what happened was I said, I want to start something. It's called Smart Technology that blocks your entire screen. When you look at a document on my screen, because it recognizes my face through facial recognition, but it won't recognize your face, so it'll block the screen. And he looked at me and said, Dexter, that's the dumbest idea I ever heard in my life. I said, wow. I said, okay. So here we are later with over 27,000 downloads of our mobile app from the individual consumers out there to that. Exactly. So somebody likes it.
Yeah, I know. And, I tell people that don't listen to people. I say, I never take advice from a person who's never walked down that road before.
Absolutely. I said that the other day, Ron. I said, why would you ask a person who doesn't own their own business about owning a business? I mean, it's just like, why would you ask? I mean, if you wanted to learn how to fly, why would you ask a janitor? Yeah, why would you ask a janitor? I mean, that's not a job. Yeah. So why would you ask? And that's what people do when it comes to asking advice. Hey, what do you think? I was thinking about this. I was thinking about that. And then, so it's I would say that's the last thing I do is care about what other people think. Yeah. Because as entrepreneurs, nobody cares about what we think anyway. They're going to think you're wrong. They're going to think you're stupid. They're going to think you're crazy. But again, when we change the world, they say, wow, that was a smart idea.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I look at, I say it's an entrepreneurial mindset. It's a mindset for people that have their own business, because you're consistently on the lookout for how can I improve this process, the same way that you started Smart Eye Technology. And a person that's more non-entrepreneurial, they just get on one step from here, and I want to go to here, and I don't want any deviations from that. But my brother, my twin brother, never had any inklings of trying to do an entrepreneurial thing. He wanted to get in corporate, and he got in corporate, and he worked his way up. That's what he wanted to do. So it's kind of a mindset, I think. The mindset that you're looking for at all times.
It is. And like I said, I would think that's fine. If that's for you to do, that's good for you.
Yeah.
But that's not my personal lifestyle. That's great for you to live that way. Yeah. That's great. but that's not what I desire in life to be. So if that's what your desire is, fine, be that. But for me, I have to take my own path because, you only have one life to live, and I have to take my own path. I have to take risks. I have to own up to those risks. I have to stay focused in those risks. So at the end of the day, that's great for those people. But for us entrepreneurs, we walk a completely different path. We look at the world from a different set of eyes. How could the world be versus how it is today? That's how we look at the world. How can we change things? How can we make something better? How can we improve the lives of other people? That's what we care about. How can we help somebody? Because that's what entrepreneurs do. I mean, they help people. Whether you're a small shoe shop that fixes maybe heels on your toes, on your feet. It's important to get those soles changed, on your shoes. Those shoes wear down. You got to get those soles changed. So that there is improving the lives of other people because it helps you back. So again, at the end of the day, we as entrepreneurs think about help. How can we help somebody else? And sometimes we as entrepreneurs need help ourselves. So that's a reality.
So the passion comes through as you talk through, this interview. So one of the other things I tell people is that, how do you view Monday mornings? And to me, that was always a sign. If it got to a point, and I hated Sunday night because I had to deal with Monday morning, that was kind of a signal for me that I got to figure something out here, or I got to leave because I'm not going to put myself through that. And so in talking to you and talking through Smart Eye Technology, the company you founded, that's not a job. That's a passion. That's a passion trip that you're on. Exactly.
And like you said, Mondays I love. I always said, why do we have to have holidays? What's the purpose of this? I mean, everybody has to rest. Believe me, I'm a big believer in that. I haven't taken the vacations that I'd love to take, but I will eventually. But as an entrepreneur, you are working those long hours. And when we say working, it's not physically at the office, picking up paper, moving around things. It's not that. When you're at home, I'm talking to my wife. My mind is in a whole different dimension, and she's like, "You hear me? Yes. Yeah. And so exactly. And so your mind is always working. And so sometimes I'm a big believer in taking time off because when I travel, even for business, I learn a lot. And so this is a way for me to grow and to think about new ideas. And that's how I came up with the idea of Smart Eye in the first place, because I was traveling. It wasn't sitting in an office or doing the normal boring things that I've done. It's just actually getting out, traveling, and seeing different things, and ideas just hit you. Not that you're trying to think of anything; it just hits you.
Okay. We're going to take a short break, and we'll come back and pick up on that thought.
We're always on the move. How we live and work have blended together, and our mobile devices are empowering us to stay on top of it all with the click of a button. But this convenience of working in so many environments can come at a price. Our security. With Smart Eye technology, you can easily protect your documents and files from unauthorized access. Based on the most powerful forms of biometric security, including facial, fingerprint, and voice recognition, Smart Eye ensures your confidential information can only be viewed by the users you've assigned, giving you 100% control of your files with no chance of unintended views. Files can then be sent, retrieved, and tracked securely in the Smart Eye app. With Smart Eye technology, your confidential information is safe and your peace of mind restored. Learn more at getsmarteye.com.
Cool. I love that video.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate that. That's one of my favorite videos.
Yeah, because when you look at that, we've all been in those situations. Somebody's over your back looking through and trying to figure out what you're gonna, and even from the precept of you're working from home, fine, but there are times that you're out and about and you maybe never give it a thought. I was on the train a few weeks ago, and I was headed into New York. And I'm sitting next to a person, and I'm there working and doing something, and I kind of look on my side, and the person's sitting there like this.
Exactly.
And I'm thinking, okay, let me just close this down because you never know. You never know.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly, and when you mention work from home, a lot of people think that work from home is safe, but if you're working with sensitive data, and your 16-year-old child walks in after you went to the bathroom, and their friend walked over and happened to see that data on your computer, that's private information that may have been sensitive, that no one should have their eyes on, and now the 16-year-old goes back and tell their father, hey, looking to work on this big deal, and he
yeah,
goes to buy that stock, got a big problem.
yeah. Okay, okay, cool. So let's talk through advice for someone that's starting out. What three pieces of advice would you give someone that has an idea, which we all do? How can I take it through execution, which is the topic of our conversation today? What are
I
some
would say
key points that you would advise them to do?
there's really three things. The first thing is of course, think out your idea. Am I helping another company? Am I helping another consumer? Am I helping another? What is this idea going to help somebody? That's the first thing. If it's not helping somebody, then it's a waste of everybody's time. And the second thing I would think of is focus on is really to keep focus, because once you realize that yes, this can help somebody, now you're going to have all of the waves and the air and every other sound blowing at you
Yeah,
saying, do you really want to do this? Because if
yeah,
you do this, do you know what this is going to require? So and those waves and those high wind sounds are family, friends, colleagues, people that you like and trust. And they're saying, I don't think that's a smart idea, because you're
hmm
intimate with them all the time. And so you
yeah,
just naturally tell them, so that focus, like Ron just said, you've got to focus 100% on that. So regardless of what they say, because they'll always say things, when things are slow for you, they'll say, I told you this wasn't going to work. Slow doesn't mean anything. Slow just means that something you're working on just takes some time. It's the bottom line. If you're focused and disciplined, it'll happen. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about being listen to the words and the winds and the water blowing and everything like that from other people. Focus on that goal, whatever that goal is. And I would say, lastly, I would say the most important thing is to remain, keep a down to earth mindset. What I mean by down to earth mindset, you're always going to have something that goes wrong, that will go wrong. You will always have something that's a challenge. It's
yeah.
just so instead of, a lot of people get mad, they throw things around, they kick things, and they get really ticked off at things, and that's a wrong mindset, because you have to keep that steady mindset regardless. You have to keep that steady mindset. You
Even
can't just
keel.
be
Yeah,
waving around through those, most like you said, like through those difficult times. You have to remain steady. It has to be steady. And this is where a lot of people, I know, I have a brother who's very emotional,
yeah,
and he runs his own business, and he just gets real mad and just throws things around, and and he scares his employees. Some of the former ones that left, he said, I don't want to work there anymore. I'm scared of the
yeah,
guy. He just
yeah.
and so I'm just saying that at the end of the day, you have to keep a level mindset, meaning you have to control your frustration, control
Mhm.
it, because if you can master those frustrations, you can master everything, because you're going to have so many things. When things are going right, you're going to have something that
Yeah,
goes wrong. When things are going wrong, then things turn right. So those
yeah.
emotional journeys,
The
just just
Mike,
just
I call it the Mike Tyson effect. Yeah,
exactly. So you just have to, control that, your emotional intelligence, and that's important for people. You're going to have employees who leave you. You're going to have people who were with you in the beginning who are not there anymore, because maybe you had to let them go, so they're not going to be so happy with you. You're going to have people who want to work with you but may not be the right fit, who will be mad at you. So as an entrepreneur, you're never going to be loved by everybody. And matter of fact, most people won't love you.
yeah.
That's just a reality. And so you have to still keep a positive attitude, despite all those challenges. And that's where a lot of people go wrong, because they say, why is it so hard? And that's what I wanted to kind of mention, those three things.
Okay. So external voices. What about the internal? That inner voice. That inner voice can work with you. When that somebody posted the other day, when that alarm goes off at 5 o'clock, and the inner voice says, "Oh, yeah, okay, you can sleep another hour or whatever it is." How do you manage the
Every,
inner voice? And
every
everybody
single
deals
day I
with
have.
yeah.
Right, exactly, and that's the loudest voice in your head is that inner voice. And so for me, what I do every single day, I just literally, think of positive things. When something's going horrible, I'll say, you know what? If things will work out, it's not that serious. Things will work out. It is not that serious. I always say to myself, it is not that serious. Things will work out, and literally they do. I mean, I've been in so many challenging situations where my back was completely against the wall, and
Yeah.
totally within like a week things completely changed, bigger than what I ever thought before. So I'm saying you have to internally, that internal engine in your mind that keeps telling you, hey, this is not going to work, this is not going to work. Listen, it will work, and it'll work better than what you're thinking if you stay positive with it, because that's the whole thing. A lot of people, they themselves begin to turn negative. If you begin to turn negative, it's kind of like a boat.
Uh-huh.
If there's a little leak in that boat, and you're in it, and you're the one saying, well, this boat's getting ready to go down, instead of just patching the hole up, patch the things up, and let's move on. And so a lot of people sit there and say, well, is this going to happen to me? I'm just going to go down with. I'm not going down with that. I'm going to
Yeah.
try to fix this thing as quick as I can.
Yeah. Yeah. So we all have friends. And how do you prune your friend list when you're trying to achieve things and you have this, I call them negative Nancy's. It's just always negative all the time. It's kind of like when your phone rings and you look and say, not now.
Exactly. That's a great point. And one of the things that I've always focused on in life, I have to go back to what King Solomon said. He said, the person who has many friends comes to ruin.
Yeah.
So avoid having lots of friends. You can have associates. I've got tons of people I know and conduct with, but they're not in my inner circle. They're not in my intimate conversations, the deep conversations. I only have really one person that I've been knowing for 30 years who's into my intimate conversations.
Yes.
Outside of that, nobody else, because you don't need to. As an entrepreneur, we live in a lonely world. And the reason I say it's a lonely world is because nobody's going to understand your way. Nobody's, even if they're with you, they're still not going to understand those internal struggles. So you live in a lonely world. So therefore, you're not going to have a lot of friends anyway. So I would say keep the friend list at super small.
Yeah.
Super small. Keep a friend list. Even the family members. Hey, they're family, but you got to move on. I mean, they're your natural blood. That's great. I love you from afar, but I can't let you into my intimate spot, that intimate thinking, that intimate, am I going to get this deal? Am I not going to get this deal? I can't let you in that spot because I mean, we're family, but you're not coming to that private, intimate spot.
What you just said was monumental because you could be focused and you can see the so-called future state of that, and someone can come along and in a general conversation give you a comment, and that's planted in your mindset, and it just kind of whoa. And all of a sudden this becomes blurry.
Exactly. I remember when I first had my first business about maybe 20 years ago, actually now, when I was trying to get a major publicly traded company as a client. And, I had spent all my money. I had literally spent all my time, and I got rid of all my smaller clients on purpose. I was making money from to focus on this big giant. It's a major company in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And I just knew, my gut told me I can get this thing. And, I remember I had a neighbor who said, Dexter, what if it doesn't happen? I mean, this is not, it may not be meant for you. And it just ripped me apart. And I don't think I even talked to him after that. I just said, okay, you know what? Yeah, it's nice to see you. And that was it. And then I remember laying on a bed, Ron, completely flat on a bed with my head down on the bed. And I remember my wife came over. She said, are you okay? I said, listen, I worked on this thing for 2 years. And I don't know if they're going to do business with me. I said, I put my all into it. I put everything, all my money, all my time. And I said, the guys never told me no. I said, I don't know if this is going to happen. And literally, I remember, she was stroking the back of my head. And she said, Dexter, she said, you worked too hard for this. She said, stick at it. And the very next day, Ron, I picked up the phone. I called the guy after making over 400 phone calls over 2 years. I called the guy the very next day. He said, Dexter, come down here and get the paperwork to get started. The very next day.
Yeah.
So had I listened to what that guy said, had I listened to what everybody else said, I wouldn't have had that client, and they were my client for over 20 years, and I still have, relationships with the top levels of the company as well. So
That's cool. That's cool, man. Well, you know what? Thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. So I was thinking through this because I said this is a master class on entrepreneurship, the discussion we had, and I'm going to send that to the appropriate channels as it relates to this, because this is kind of what the real world looks like, as opposed to that idealized version of, the person at the top of the iceberg. So thank you so much for sharing all of that.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you. So stay on for a second, and we'll come back as we close out.